What's up, YouTubers? Tonight, we're going to talk a little bit about what would be a good knife to give to a firefighter. I have a nephew that I'm going to be giving a knife to. I want him to have a knife for general purpose use, just because I'm a knife guy anyway, but also because it makes a lot of sense to have a decent cutting tool. I don't know what tool he utilizes. He may or may not use this for actual firefighting, but one of the first things I thought about is you need to have something that's going to work fairly well in gloves, not just one glove, but two gloves too. So in terms of operability, that's one of the first things that I really thought of is what's a knife that works well in gloves. For the most part, a lot of Spyderco things, and I'm going to go ahead and start just knocking some of these out of here. This is not a Spyderco. This is actually a Benchmade. I did a recent review of that. The Griptilian with the round hole. I don't know. I'll call it a Spidey hole, but Benchmades with their access lock and other bar locks are fairly effective. You can handle them fairly well in gloves. This is a little bit small. Don't really have a Benchmade, but I think, I just think it's a little bit small in hand. But I will say deployment works very well in gloves. So this, I think, would be a very solid option for the sole reason that this one is a $200 knife versus the Hogue Ritter RSK Mark 1. I think I would choose this one principally because thumb studs are definitely much easier when you're wearing gloves. So that one is not going to be kicked out. We will come back to that. But that is why I'm kicking out the Benchmade from there. And I haven't made all these decisions beforehand. But some of them that I'm going to kick out right away. Then it doesn't make a lot of sense too. If you're going to bring this into a fire, you may lose it. You may drop it from a 3-story building. It doesn't make sense to do a lot of custom sort of stuff and or knives that are super expensive. This is the 80-20 with full titanium scales from Original Goat. Doesn't make a lot of sense. From a use perspective, it's fantastic because the Shark Lock is very easy to operate in gloves. Very easy to operate with two hands in gloves. Really, really good and useful. And maybe one of them that's not custom, but I think a full metal model may or may not make sense. I don't know. In the event that it gets really hot in the event of a fire, but they're going to be wearing gloves. So you lose this, you just lost a $625 knife, and it's unobtainium anyway. So I'm going to kind of kick out some of these that don't make sense from the perspective of if you lose it or you drop it from the 3-story building, you never get it back. That's going to be kind of a painful one. I'm not going to be giving them that. Likewise, I think a button lock like the Freeman 451 here, full titanium. Very easy to operate in gloves. I think would be a very good knife. These are all going to be very big and robust. And if you, in the event that you need to price something, it makes a lot of sense. This particular one is S45 EN steel, and like I said, very easy to function in gloves. So yeah, that would be one. But again, this button lock doesn't make a lot of sense because this is a $450 knife, custom from Freeman Outdoors. So again, I'm going to kick that one out, and we're going to, kind of just start to whittle these down. Same reason. I mean, designed by a firefighter, Rick Hinder. This is the XM18. I've actually moved this one over to washers. Makes a little bit more sense for user knives than bearings. But this is a frame lock. Frame locks don't do the best in gloves. I think one with thumb studs and a flipper is very good. Now, frame lock works fine two-handed putting away. So in that sense, this is not a bad option. But again, you lose this knife. You just lost $425. They're hard to get. So I'm not going to be giving him this. It's just one of those things where if I were to tell him, say, oh yeah, this is a $420 knife. Don't lose it. Well, no, I want him to use this knife. And if he loses it, not a big deal. So the XM18 is going to be kicked out of there. So you're talking about some less expensive knives as we go forward here. You have the ZT0308. That's what I'm kind of leaning towards out here. And I have not yet picked the one that I'm going to give him. But these are kind of, again, knives that make a lot of sense for a firefighter, I think. Again, quick, very strong, quick and easy to deploy in gloves. That's why I'm just wearing gloves this entire time. The 8010 cold steel is very good. And this one also would work very well for just everyday use. Backlocks are very easy to manipulate in gloves. And those with thumb studs, this is a very, very good option. And definitely one of the top 3 in the running. So I will go ahead and put that up there, and we will come back to that. That's definitely one of those in the running. By the way, in lieu of the XM18, you can kind of go with a $300 full titanium designed by Rick Hinderer. Pretty dang strong. Definitely you're going to be able to beat on this. I don't think you're going to want to pry a door, maybe, but it's it's a little bit thinner. But this is the ZT 0562 tie. So I've had a beer or two tonight. This is a good option. It's a flipper only though. The thumb studs are really not overly accessible. And again, the frame locks are not the best for single hand deployment. Two-handed, or I should say redeployment. Two-handed, they work just great. I think you could have a fairly thick pair of gloves and the 0562 tie would be fine. So that, I think, does remain in the running. The button locks, like we talked about on the Freeman, a button lock that would work, I think, also would be the Pallas. But I love my Pallas. Tough to get those, the Spartan, so I'm just not giving that one away. But the Hogue knives X03, this is a knife that is, it has thumb studs, but I will say for whatever reason, I've found this one a little bit tougher to deploy. Button locks are great though when you're in gloves, and this is not the best one for just pushing the button and using inertia to get it out. Again, it would probably be the aluminum one, which is the X01, I believe, but the X03. No, this I think also being the FRN, if this happens to land on fire, it's just going to probably melt really bad. So that I think would be a bad option. G10's going to be a little bit more robust. I think my card is even going to be a little bit better on that 0308. Possibly the G10 and or the light version of the Cold Steel 8015 light. Thumb stud deployment, very good, comfortable in hand, big, certainly robust enough to pry open a lot of things. And also, with this Scorpion lock, very easy to manipulate in gloves. This is a very serious contender. So I think, even with my opposite hand, this is a really, really good option. So I think I'm kind of down to these four. The AD15 light, the from Cold Steel. The Cold Steel AD10 is really good with just the back lock. Well, the triad lock, but, back deployed. The ZTO 308 is really good. And what I liked about this one is he does also do a fair bit of cooking in the firehouse for the guys. And this has a little bit of that nice thin sliciness that will work for, hey, you need to cut a piece of something for something you're cooking, bacon or whatever. You need to cut something open. This is pretty good. It works well in gloves. And it has that double utility for regular, everyday use. Like I said, frame locks aren't the best for deployment, but this one isn't bad. This one isn't bad at all. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and kick out the 0562 just because it's a little bit smaller, doesn't do so well in gloves, a little bit tougher to deploy, also and retract, certainly in gloves. So I think the 0562 is not going to be as good of an option. By the way, let me go ahead and bring out one that I did consider. This is not mine. This is actually in for service that I have from a buddy of mine. But this is the Spyderco Rescue. This is a very specific purpose-built rescue knife. Not necessarily for firefighters, but it would be useful. Again, if you needed to cut somebody out of their the straps of their seatbelt in a car, this would be good because you could put pressure without the stabby tip up next to them and not worry about cutting the person when you're cutting off the strap. It does have the serrations. That was a consideration too. And this one also does have a tungsten carbide glass breaker. You just actuate it by squeezing the knife. I'm going to be doing a little bit of coverage on this in the coming weeks here as I recondition it. So that was a consideration, but the Spidey hole is not the best. Everyday use, this is not so good. If you talk to most firefighters, it's very rare that they actually are having to cut out people from their straps in the cars necessarily, or they'll just have a razor blade or something like that. So again, I wanted to have that everyday use utility. So this is kind of what I'm down to. The Hogue Ritter Mark 1 MK1 or Mark 1 Ritter survival knife. This one is a really good and meets the bill for everyday use. The Axis lock is very good, strong. I think this one would be good overall. But I think, again, it's just a little bit small in the hands. And it suffers the same thing that the Griptilian, the full-size Griptilian did is in gloves, it's just going to be a little bit smaller in the hand. Knowing Austin, I do know he has hands that are at least as big as mine. Mine are medium large. So I'm really going to go for a little bit bigger knife. And that's why I'm going to probably kick out the 8010 from this. It's a little bit small in terms of your handle area. I don't know how big a firefighter's gloves are, but I can only assume they're bigger than my leather gloves here. These get a little bit tight in the 8010. I do love the backlock retrieval home knowing gloves. It's really, really good. If he doesn't like what I give him, this would definitely be my next alternative, in all honesty. So I'm then really down to the Cold Steel 8015 Light, which just surprisingly is so good in gloves, and then the 0308. And in the end, I think, and I kind of knew this from the beginning, also because I have a couple ZTO 308s, is, I'm not going to go with the Cold Steel 8015 Light because it's a funky actuation in terms of the Scorpion lock, and also for somebody who's not a knife dude who's always handling it, the Scorpion lock can be, I won't say confusing, but not the most straightforward and obvious. It's just not the most obvious. Some people, there could be some danger of trying to open it, or basically retract it that way. Like this, it has to be a two-way. I mean, I've handled a lot of knives, so I can do this, the single hand retraction, and that's why that one just doesn't make the most sense. I think in the end, the ZTO 308 is probably a really, really good overall knife. Like I said, easy enough to actuate with the flipper. It's on bearings, but yet this is really strong. Easy enough to service that pivot. Just requires a wrench, basically. And honestly, this one is a lot easier than the 0562 tie as far as putting back in gloves. Let me see if I can do it left-handed. I'm not a lefty. But, yeah, the double clutch is not so bad on this knife. And like I said, with just, for everyday carry, this one makes a lot of sense for me, for a firefighter, and really for anybody's use. Thin enough, but thick enough. Thin enough to slice and do a job as a cutting tool. Thick enough to pry if necessary. That tip's going to be sufficiently strong. And I've seen Whitty over at USA May Blade beat the snot out of his and how well it's handled, prying, nails and things like that, doing deck work. So I think this one's going to be really good. It's got titanium on one side. This particular one has micarta on the other. A really good combination. So if it gets wet or otherwise, this is going to be a really good one. So in the end, for me, it's not maybe necessarily the best, but I think in this case, it's the one that makes the most sense. If it gets broken, lost, stolen, or otherwise, it's not going to be a killer. ZTO 308 is fairly much a commodity, and I can get him another one. I already have another one. So I'm going with that, but I would request, if you've made it this far, I want to know what other good options might there be that kind of meet that criteria. One that's tough, usable, good for everyday carry, would also work in a firefighting situation where you might need to cut something or, pry something in a small pinch, or use it as a secondary pry to hold something, because they have specialized tools. Isn't going to be super expensive, custom, and that sort of thing. But you trust it. And, for me, the 0308, but do tell me what I might be missing. Comment below. I appreciate this. Good cheer during this Christmas time. Take care.